Welcome. My name is Eric Luffer. I am Executive Director of Humanities Texas. I'd like to welcome you this evening on behalf of Humanities Texas. If you are unfamiliar with Humanities Texas, we are a private nonprofit organization based in Austin that serves as the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our mission is to promote the humanities and humanities education statewide, and we do so through a wide range of programs. We hold in-person and online workshops for Texas teachers. We circulate traveling exhibitions. We award grants to organizations throughout Texas. We run a storytime program promoting family literacy throughout the state. And we have a wonderful reading and discussion program for veterans and their loved ones. We also hold lectures and discussions as we are doing this evening. And tonight's program is the first in a series that we will be holding in partnership with Texas Foodways. So we're looking forward to continuing the conversations that we begin this evening in the coming months. Before we start tonight, I have two notes. The first is that this program is made possible with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities in support of the agency's Night of Ideas 2021 partnership with the Cultural Services Division of the French Embassy in the United States. So as ever, we thank the National Endowment for the Humanities for their support of our programming. The other note is that if you have questions for our presenters this evening during the program, please drop them into the Q&A, and the moderator will include them in the discussion. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I will now pass the mic, so to speak, over to my co-host, Marvin Bendelow.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, everybody. My name is Marvin Bendeley. I'm the director of Foodways Texas. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for our panelists for taking time out of their day to join us for this, what is sure to be an interesting conversation. Foodways Texas is a program in the University of Texas at UT here in Austin. We're in the American Studies Department. We started off as a nonprofit, found a home at UT, so we're still a nonprofit, just at a public university. We go around the state collecting oral history interviews regarding foodways in the state of Texas. And we also hold events like this. We hold events that also require a fee, like our symposium every year, which is themed and changes annually. We usually hold it in spring, but of course with the pandemic, we haven't been able to do that the last two springs. And then we also do our barbecue summer camps, which we hopefully will be able to catch up on this summer. We are a membership organization as well, but we are based at the University of Texas. I think they're going to put both Humanities Texas and Foodways Texas web addresses in the chat here, or in the chat here in a minute for you. So if you have any questions for us, please get in touch at that address. I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to my friend Todd Romero. He's going to be our host tonight, our moderator. He's a associate professor of history at the University of Houston. He's also a founding member of Foodways Texas, as well as on the board of directors or the board of Humanities Texas as well. So thank you, Todd.
Thanks so much, Marvin. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I get the honor of introducing our speaker, José Ralat. He is the Texas Monthly Magazine's taco editor, and he writes about tacos and Mexican food for that publication. He's also the author of a wonderful book called American Tacos, A History and Guide. He's written for a number of print and online publications, including EaDeaux, Imbibe, Dallas Observer, D Magazine, Vice, Cowboys and Indians Magazine, and Gravy, which is the publication of the Southern Foodways Alliance. And so if Jose would join us, I'm going to start off by asking him a few questions tied to his writing.
Hi.
Hi, Jose. I like your background.
Thank you.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask you has to do with being a taco editor. It's a job I didn't know existed until you had it, and I immediately was filled with envy. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you became a journalist and then a food writer and then a taco editor.
Okay, so I actually started out in journalism and publishing in college, but I was a poetry major, and moved on to actually editing a neuropsychiatric journal before getting into food writing. And food writing was part accident back when I lived in Brooklyn, and then deliberately here in Texas, I had an editor call me up and ask me if I like tacos. And I said, well, who doesn't like tacos? He said, great, pitch me something on Monday. A little known fact, I was at Hurricane Harbor during that call. I didn't have a job. I didn't have health insurance for my family. My son was 8 months old. He's 12 now. And I needed the money. So I didn't know much when I went into this, even though my wife is Tejana, and she taught me a lot. I learned as I went along. I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of traveling. I did a lot of listening. Well, I didn't do as much eating as one would imagine, because it's journalism. It's not just reviews. So I was telling stories. Then I begged and pleaded for this job while I was working on the 2015 taco issue of Texas Monthly. And 4 years later, I finally got the job. It didn't exist before I pitched it. I, like you said, I read about Mexican food. Taco editors, just catchy and cool. And I've been doing that for a year and a half or so. Last year I traveled 9,100 miles and ate probably like 4,000 tacos, not including return visits and double orders, because there are places that I go back to 3 times, depending on the topic. And we put out another taco package last year, which we had to amend because of the pandemic. And so this taco package type will come out every 5 years or so. And so my job is to read, write, and do a little eating with a lot of traveling. Traveling's been hard because of the pandemic. I haven't left the Dallas area since October, and I'll finally be on the road in April. I am fully vaccinated, thankfully. But yeah, that's it.
I'm grateful to live in a state where our probably most important magazine has taco and barbecue editors. So I'm grateful you have the job. The other question that I had for you has to do with authenticity. One of the things I loved about your book, American Tacos, is the way that you talk about authenticity. And you do it in a number of different ways. One of the things I love that you do is you talk about the abuelita principle. And then the other thing you do that I thought was a really interesting contrast is you talk about how American conceptions of tacos is often very narrow, and that the American conception of what constitutes an authentically Mexican taco is often in stark contrast to what a traveler might find if they went to the center of the taco universe in Mexico City, where you point out that cholongos eat all kinds of things that sort of authenticity obsessed Americans would probably see as too cheesy, or perhaps would look at toppings like, as I recall, French fries as unorthodox and inauthentic. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about how your view of authenticity shapes the way you think about writing about tacos, both for the book, but also, I've been really interested in the way that you write about it in the magazine as well.
Well, I think it's a bogus concept, but I tend to write a lot about it, don't I? I think it exists on paper, but I think that that everyone's got their own chocolate chip cookie recipe, right? So your grandmother's recipe might be different from your best friend's grandmother's recipe, but they're both chocolate chip cookies. What's the big deal? So for Americans, I would put it that way. But the abuelita principle is coined because when Americans, specifically Mexican Americans, whether they be Chicanos or Tejanos, talk about what is real Mexican food, they default to, well, the only true Mexican food is what my grandmother made. What if your grandmother was a bad cook? Let's not mess it around. If you're gonna bring it that personally and that rigid, I'm gonna just play it down too. The lesson there, I think, is let's not make knee-jerk reactions. All right. Mexican food, wherever it is, cannot be contained to a box. And it's, to me, it's a living organism. It's a fluid, dynamic gastronomy that differs all over Mexico. So why can't it here? I define tacos as representational of their time and place, which is part of what we're going to discuss this evening. And that just means things are hyper local, things are regional. So what you eat in Oaxaca is not going to be what you eat in Houston for the most part. There are generic tacos everyone eats, but those aren't the interesting ones most of the time. Like, carne asada is cheap, so what? Yeah, so it's just a way of talking about the diversity without putting the weight of tradition on the matriarchs. It's not fair.
Thank you so much. Well, I think this is a nice sort of transition to the way in which you evoke sort of the regionalism of American tacos. And I know you were going to say a little bit, maybe this is a nice transition to your discussion with the wonderful Harry family, is talking a little bit about how you think of the regions of American tacos that represent that, that diversity in our corner of North America.
Well, the food and regionalisms are defined by population shifts uh, and economics, supply and demand. What is available and what do people want? Uh, Here in Texas, well, let's not kid ourselves. This remains Mexico. Uh, Whether we want to believe that or not, it remains true. Uh, it Without Mexico, there would be no Texas, and Mexico and Mexican culture informs everything. We've adapted regional eh, eh, ingredients and the American eh, commodities market to our own palates. So you get things like the puffy taco, which resembles fisalbute, uh, the crispy taco, which resembles the taco dorado. Um, you know, and in pockets of the states, you have K-Mex, and you have Filipino tacos now. And in Houston, we have Cajun tacos popping up because, as Jason and Harry told me once, Houston is the largest city in Cajun country. And it's a great intersection for all things culinary. It's the state's largest and most diverse city. So who else? Who knows what else is going to pop up? But right now, they can claim Cajun tacos, and uh, it's only going to get better.
And we're all the richer for it.
Yeah. Yes, we
Well,
are.
shall I hand it off to you to start the conversation with the Harrys?
Sure. Hi, this is Jason and Starr Harry, owners of EaDeaux's Cajun Corsina, as you can see behind me. This is one of their trucks. I'm gonna let them tell the story of this truck, which I love. They opened their concept in 2018 on their property of their car wash in the EaDeaux neighborhood of Houston. EaDeaux is east downtown. It's quickly gentrifying. There is a lot of expendable income coming through, and not a lot of food options. And that's where EaDeaux's comes in. But you know, EaDeaux's is more than a gimmick and a name and a place to eat. So Jason and Starr, can you give us a little background of yourselves and then the way that the truck, the van really came to be?
Absolutely, Jose. So, as you mentioned, we did open our car wash back in 2016 in East Downtown, also known as EaDeaux, the new gentrified name. And as we were putting together our car wash and looking to not just appeal to our customers, there were things that we kind of realized that you know we probably need to put to enhance the wait time of our car wash, because it's a hand car wash, and customers are not in and out. So oftentimes the customers would always ask, hey, where's there to eat around here? Not to mention our employees were, some of them would bring their lunch with them. Long days, they might bring dinner too, but like summertime, right? But we were kind of like, man, what can we do to enhance that experience of being here at our car wash? And Jason loves to cook, and I like to eat, so he kind of came up with this idea of, well, maybe we can add a food truck. And he went on Craigslist, all kinds of places to find a food truck. And one day he says, Star, let's go for a ride. And he takes me to this place, had like guard dogs, all around. And
RV park.
yeah, it's like an RV park. I was like, where the heck are we going? So anyway, he comes up to this truck and he's like, oh my God, what do you think? And I said, oh, I mean, it has potential. So long story short, we bought the truck behind you. I call it Big Bertha. And Big Bertha, we've had our time with her. She's definitely gotten us started. In the beginning, we did put some money into it, like getting the engine done and things like that, just to keep it rolling. But we quickly realized that Big Bertha can't hop on the freeway and go more than 40 miles an hour. So we had to transition to something better. But, Big Bertha got us started for sure.
Great, and thank you. And so, Star, you were raised in Phoenix in the Southwest, and Jason, you were raised in Cajun country in Louisiana. So I see the food coming together at home as it would neighbor to neighbor, of different ethnicities or races trading to the point that you have Tex-Mex tacos. EaDeaux has a similar story tied to its location, right?
Yep. So we told a story about it being East Downtown, but before 2013, East Downtown didn't exist. EaDeaux didn't exist. Before then, it was just the location that we are at Leland and Inner Street. It was just right smack in between the Second Ward and Third Ward. Some people, I would say, the Black folk that live in the area would say that it is Third Ward, and the Hispanic folk in the area would say it's Second Ward. And
Segundo barrio.
Yeah. So when we established the business, it's almost like it was a place where both of those groups of people met, as well as people from the new neighborhood, and it's a nice open seating area, so it's almost like a little hangout spot as well. So why not blend cultures and have Creole, Cajun type food, and food with Hispanic influence as well. And just blending those two, you could kind of make both both sets of folks happy, and also make the real hippie new folks happy too, because they're trying something new.
So for everyone else watching, this is how tacos are born. This is how any regional or niche food is born organically. But I do want to ask you, with your customers, how do you define Cajun tacos to them, and what's the most popular taco?
Yeah. So one thing I would say is, so we had a lot of resistance in the beginning to what our food was, and we there was one night of the week we used to do a bar that was more in the third ward area, and people would be like, I don't want this crap. What do you mean? Boudin tacos? Just give me the boudin. So, we dealt with a lot of that, and eventually it got to a point where we kind of picked up steam and got some social media movement, and we got more people who were kind of daring to try things. I still can't get some of my friends to want to have a gumbo taco, yet it's probably one of the best things that we have on the dish. I mean, on the menu, because we don't even carry it every week because it doesn't sell that often. Just because people are not as daring, right? But one thing that really sells, and one thing that's a big seller, and the most popular thing that we have is the boudin nachos. So, if there are 5 people coming to the truck, at least 3 out of the 5 are going to get the boudin nachos. So we kind of know how to prepare for a day when we open up. We just buy the heck out of boudin and and get ready to serve that, right?
The Mexican town where nachos were born has an international taco festival. I mean, nacho festival every year. You should head over. It's just on the other side of Eagle Pass. So what is the difference between Cajun and Creole?
Okay, so that's an interesting one, and I think a lot of people don't really tackle the subject. So, it's two different things, right? So it's Cajun and Creole if you're talking about people. Then there's Cajun and Creole if you're talking about food. If we're talking about food, then your Creole food would be your city food. Your city food in South Louisiana. So it would be the dishes that you will find in New Orleans. Those will be more tomato based type foods. Like shrimp Creole. They may cook okra, the same way that we do, but they may put a little bit more uh, tomato based. Um, Yet, I'm from Cajun country, which is Acadiana in Southwest Louisiana, and what we tend to have Cajun food, which is your country foods. So things like boudin, you know, maybe I would say maybe 10, 20 years ago, if you ask someone in New Orleans what boudin was, they might laugh at you because you know, we weren't sharing foods with each other like that. And uh, one thing to kind of elaborate on it being country food, you know, it's you you see things like in the country you slaughter a hog, and that's basically what boudin is made of. It's made of all of the parts that didn't get eaten or didn't get turned into pork chops. You turn it into boudin and grind it up. Most people don't know that, but
Sounds great to me.
They just say
yeah,
it tastes
it
good.
still tastes real good. Yeah.
So uh, there are the Cajun people were who developed from French Canadians uh, who were white, but now are African Americans considered Cajun as well?
Yeah, so that would be a big no for me, right? So I so even though you know I come from a Cajun country, I've never heard a black person being referred to as a Cajun. When we start talking about race and color, typically the black folk are referred to as Creole, and the white folk are referred to as Cajun. Now, I don't. My family, we don't call, you know, we don't fit in either of those categories. We're just, you know, black folk from South Louisiana that had French influence. You know, my, you know, the generation before me, my grandfather and his father, all they knew was French, and they spoke French. Now I don't know exactly where that influence came from, whether it came directly from West Africa or from Haiti or from somewhere in the Caribbean. You know, things kind of get lost when you talk about the African diaspora and and how things got moved around in slavery times. So I wouldn't classify myself as Cajun or Creole, but I think that, you know, coming from a family that was definitely in the slavery, uh, as a son of slaves, you know, we had to do the cooking, right? So if you know, if it was Cajun influenced food, then we likely made the food and we passed those recipes down over and over. And you know, I come from a line of great cooks. Um, it's interesting. We have this in my town in New Iberia. We have this big plantation that sits on the main street downtown, and I have been able to trace, you know, some of my family back to that plantation, and also as, you know, sharecroppers and later on servants, even in the early 1900s, and they were cooking. So, you know, we're bringing some of that influence into the food because I'm sure it's some of the same recipes being passed down.
So, like many Latin American countries and cultures, it gets a little fuzzy uh, because of population shifts and slave trading within the Caribbean predominantly. That that's what I'm thinking, and that Louisiana was originally Spanish helps, but Cajun culture and Cajun culinary culture are really informed by African culinary traditions, just like all Southern food, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, so one of the things that I said that, you know, if I ever did anything culinary, I will always have okra in the menu. And a lot of folks don't know how you know, how okra came to the United States. So okra was, you know, a lot of the slaves, they put the okra inside of their hair, the okra seeds, and they came over on the slave ships and brought it over. And I think okra has always been a sign of, you know, a sign of some connection back to Africa. Yeah.
Do you see yourselves as part of a larger movement within Texas and the South? And the question I'm asking is informed by the idea that there's an American regional category called Cermex,
Mhm.
which is the hybridization of the two greatest corn cultures on earth, and that's Mexican and Southern. And so, do you see yourselves as part of that? And have you seen other examples of Cajun Tex-Mex within Houston?
Yeah. So you want? Oh, so she's gonna go get the baby. The baby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
but so I think we're starting to see it a little bit more. Um, I do think that we are kind of somewhat a part of that movement, but to be honest, it was, you know, just doing this stuff. It wasn't much research. It was very natural. It just felt like something to do. You know, so for example, you know, the way I approached the menu was like, all right, I know we're just starting out. We're not going to have many customers. Um, you know, when we make a pot of gumbo, let's let's see if we could, you know, make multiple dishes with that pot of gumbo, and let's see if we can make a taco out of some of the meat that's in that gumbo, and you know, stretch that pot a little longer. So it wasn't a lot of thought behind it, but I do think we are part of that movement.
I've heard of Cajun taco trucks and operations in southeast towns like Beaumont, but they're elusive. I have never found concrete evidence that they exist. People tell me, and then there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So I think this is really interesting. One of the it, it's something that I think could only happen in Houston, just like Indomex came from Houston as we know it, subcontinental Indian, Mexican fusion. But, you know, this is going to be a big question. You've been open for for more than 3 years. One of those years was a pandemic year. How has the reception and the popularity grown, and how has the pandemic impacted the business?
Yeah, well, you know, one thing I think, Jose, that you know about us is, you know, this food truck and car wash is definitely not our main source of income. And for, you know, when everything happened with the pandemic, you know, it was more of, I was more focused on family, more focused. You know, I have this feeling, even with the winter storm a few weeks ago, once we start going to HEB or any of our grocers, and we start putting limits on food items, like, you know, you can only take one or two packs of chicken, just because we're in sort of a emergency type of mode. When it gets to that, and you know, Star and I were kind of doing this thing as almost a glorified hobby, we kind of step back and we say, hey, you know, we don't need to take this food from the store, which could be going on someone's shelf, and, you know, trying to sell it for profit, right? So during the, you know, March last year, we kind of just said, all right, we'll just shut down, you know. And what, you know, the impact of that is, when you shut down and then you pop up 2 months later or 3 months later, you know, probably the entire 2020 we were a pop-up concept. We changed to a pop-up concept, and the very first time you pop up again, it's like you never left.
Yeah, people are fiending. It, you know, for us, it did work for us. And even kind of looking at, you know, just the idea of going back to having employees working on the food truck. That's something that we chose not to do last year, as far as staffing back up, just because we didn't want to put any additional pressure on us, being that we would have someone depending on their livelihood, you know, based on if we're open or not. So we, you know, from that perspective, I was like, collect your unemployment, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I have run out of questions. I think one of the issues is we've talked so many times, and I've written about you guys so many times for so many publications that a lot of it just becomes common knowledge, or just I take for granted. Is there something that I missed that you want to talk about that speaks to the topic at hand?
Sorry, you want to?
Well, you know, during the pandemic of us being shut down, we made a little hairy.
You want to show our little?
I didn't mean that, but yeah, I could hear the baby. Oh, look at that. Adorable.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're still multitasking, you know. It's definitely been it's definitely been a joy, and kind of a great break to slow down, you know, focus on family. But we're still excited to keep things moving with EaDeaux and EaDeaux. EaDoux's our car wash, but
Yeah.
you know, to continue on with what we have started.
Yeah. You're on.
There were a few questions. One that I see in the chat that is being from New Iberia. Do you use a lot of Tabasco in your cooking, or mostly as an accompaniment to your food?
Yep. So that's one thing. So all of these years that I've been cooking, I didn't really use Tabasco, until about last year. I was like, you know, because we were at home, I was cooking every day and experimenting with different tastes, and it's my go-to now. It's like it's crawfish season right now, and I've found that Tabasco is one of the things that just takes my crawfish boil to the next level. So yes, you know, Tabasco, New Iberia, that the Avery Island connection, yeah.
And you know what's funny about that? His mom would bring us boxes of Tabasco, and it would
Yeah,
just sit there. And finally, finally, he's like, let me try something new with this.
yeah. So if you're from New Iberia or Avery Island area, you probably have never paid for a bottle of Tabasco in your life, um, just because everyone has a box. I don't know if they're giving it out or someone's taking it. And the same thing with Martin Salt. So Martin Salt has a big salt mine uh, close to Avery Island. It's called Weeks Island, and you know, I don't think we ever pay for Martin Salt either.
Uh, you know where chilies come from? Chilies come from Mexico.
Yeah,
So there's another connection. And for the audience, I want to make another Mexican connection that I'm not trying to legitimize this. These are legitimate tacos, but a lot of the tacos that you sell are stew based, and uh, the, the the most common or most popular category of tacos, and my personal favorite, are Mexican tacos de guisados, which are home homey stew dishes. So this is just an extension of that, and you see a lot of the same ingredients because of the migration of
yeah.
chilies and Native American ingredients. Todd, do we have any questions?
We have one from Tiffany Rogers in Houston, or about Houston. I'm not sure where Tiffany Rogers is. But she points out that Houston's very diverse. She says that it's steadily growing, something that you talked about with your corner of what is now called EaDeaux. How do traditional Mexican and Tex-Mex restaurants respond to the Mexican and Cajun Creole fusion? Are they intrigued? Do they look to blend or infuse Cajun Tex-Mex into their menus? And I guess, have you gotten any response from people perhaps on the El Segundo Barrio side of the neighborhood?
Yeah, so see, that's the thing. So this is so much of, we're not in the industry. We are just some folks that's trying to feed our customers, right? So we don't go to industry night, or we don't pop in and go to the different um, restaurants in our neighborhood and go into the back kitchen and have relationships with chefs and stuff. We're just doing our own thing, and we don't really know. So, but one thing is, though, we do get good reception from the second ward folk. Uh, it's different, they prefer corn tortillas, of course, but it's they like it, I think.
Can
Can
I
I
ask?
add to that? Oh, can I add to that? I, I, across the South, I have seen watering holes, bars, big joints that sell all these tacos, right? Just a panoply. It's just it, huge taco menus, and they'll have like a shrimp Creole taco, but I don't see it as representative of anything because it's not like they're putting much thought into it. that's appropriating something just for profit. So yeah, Todd, go ahead with your next question, please.
So I have a question myself that comes out of your comment about not being industry people. How does coming from South Louisiana, where at least in my limited experience, it seems like everyone's accustomed to cooking for an army, right? That there's sort of a tradition of cooking for 50 people, for 150 people. Do you think that's made the transition from being people who like to cook to people who have a food truck and feed larger numbers of people a little bit easier?
I think so. You know, I'm a part of a few different Facebook groups, and you know, I see at least it's at least 100 folk that moved from Louisiana, some part of Louisiana that's used to cooking outside with the backyard pot, and they're just transitioning it right into a food truck or some sort of outside tent setup, and you know that's the way they're surviving. So I think that's definitely one thing that makes it easy to transition. One thing about me, I so you know I like the concept of having the food truck, but I have really grown to love cooking for a large amount of people because you know my day job is project manager, engineering. So I know how to take a recipe, multiply it times 100, and see what happens. And I know that my taste is going to be the exact same thing, and that stuff kind of excites me.
Thanks so much. We have a question, or actually two questions that I'm going to combine them, from Melissa Huber and then David Lefwich. They're both about Starr's background in Arizona, and sort of pointing out that the Mexican food that one encounters in Phoenix is different than Tex-Mex. And I guess the question would be, how has your experience as someone who grew up around that particular regional Mexican food shaped what y'all do?
Oh,
Also, beautiful, baby's beautiful.
thank you. It's definitely been different. You know, I think I can go back to when, you know, Jason and I first started dating, and I remember saying, let's get some Mexican food tonight, and he was like, yeah, let's go to Taco Bell, and I said, what? You know, he didn't have a clue. So fast forward, took him home to Arizona, and we went to a Mexican restaurant where, you know, the food was good to me. You know, I'm talking enchiladas, and you know, Jason was kind of like, whoa, this isn't what I expected. It was different for him, you know. So what I learned from that was that he hadn't really had an opportunity to get good, authentic Mexican food. And those are some things that I've kind of brought to not only our relationship, but to EaDeaux as well. You know, like fresh pico de gallo, actually knowing how to make it, guacamole. And, you know, for me, I had to start with the simple things and just kind of transition that into items that we put onto our menu. So we haven't come up with like an enchilada taco, but that would be kind of good.
Do it, because I've had some before.
You have?
Yes, and they're amazing generally.
Uh-huh. Just give me lots of cheese, lots of queso.
I haven't had
Well, we would put chile con carne on it.
Well, that is all of our questions from the audience, unless someone wants to provide us with some others. Anything else, Jose?
Well, I saw that Monica briefly asked about spice levels comparatively. So I would say borderland Mexican food is spicy, but generally Mexican food is not spicy until you put the salsa on it, or there's a chili component, but spice isn't the target. How would you compare them?
So it's a different spice. And you know, one thing, it's funny, you know, when her mom comes to town, you know, she always she eats my food with a disclaimer.
Is it spicy?
She's like, is it gonna be spicy? But then when I go to Phoenix and I go and eat something at their house, and like my mouth is on fire
And he's sweating.
because it's like habanero. I don't know what kind of peppers they use there, but yeah, you know, it's a different type of spice. One thing, so if I would comment on spice and Cajun and how Cajun has made the transition to Houston and Houston culture, I say one thing that I don't like about how Cajun works in Houston is that people believe that it has to be super, super duper spicy with red pepper. That's just not the case. You know, I had to even tweak my crawfish recipe a little bit in Houston just because, you know, Houston people thought it was kind of weak.
Yeah.
You know, but that's just how we eat crawfish in South Louisiana. We actually want to enjoy the crawfish and we don't want to burn our face off. So.
Order butt.
Wow. I don't know where to go from there, but I would say to you guys and to everyone, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's the one thing, right? And that's been one of the ongoing themes tonight. I want to just say once again, thank you guys for talking with us.
Yeah, thank you.
I did see a question. Do you have a secret ingredient?
Secret ingredient? No, I keep telling you guys, we're just regular people, you know. We just kind of make tacos, you know. No secret ingredients. Just using recipes that are hundreds, you know, 50 to 100 years old, and taking those recipes and mixing it and making fusion.
I'd say the ingredient is love. I would say we cook with love.
That's a
Well
good
said.
Yeah.
Well said. There is someone that asked me when the Big Texas Monthly taco issue came out, that would be Connie. It came out in December of 2020. So it's online now and it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, there's some great pictures and great words and descriptions in there.
Jose, can you remind us what the interval is for the next taco? Is it like the barbecue where it's every few years? I know you mentioned this earlier.
Yes. So it's kind of all over the place, but we've begun to set a schedule because nothing like this has ever been done before. This is all uncharted waters, and I'm the guy treading it. It's like every 5 years. Most of the work that I'm doing is printed online at texasmonthly.com under the food and drink vertical, and that's all over the place. It's reviews, eh, eh, history, explainers, quirky things, whatever whatever I feel like writing. It can be serious, like the impact of Governor Abbott's rollback of COVID restrictions on essential workers of color. For example, or I could just riff on Cajun tacos.
Can I ask a question of the Harrys? I noticed in your Instagram feed that you've been doing crawfish boils. And since I live a few miles away from where that truck is, I'm curious if you're doing one this weekend. And then I also have a follow-up question. You mentioned that you were doing some workshopping of a new potential star taco that would feature crawfish boil, maybe a little bit of andouille, touch of corn, perhaps, a little potato.
Yep. So our crawfish boils are every Saturday. We usually have the crawfish ready to serve at about 1 p.m. As long as my crawfish truck isn't running late, like it's been the past 2 weeks. But 1 o'clock, we drop the crawfish and we have it all ready, and people just show up in swarms by 1:30, and then it's all gone by about 3:30. But one thing is, we always pretty much cook a lot more potatoes and corn and sausage. So we are flirting with the idea of the crawfish boil taco, or maybe we call it the after boil taco, where we'll take some crawfish tails, peel them, mix them up with some of the potatoes from the boil, some of the corn from the boil, and some of the sausage, and kind of decorate it the same way we decorate the gumbo taco and the boudin taco, and that should be a pretty big hit.
Great, thank you. It sounds like you're going to need test panelists for that.
Yeah, come on through. We got
Grace you there, Todd.
Now, one thing about that taco, when we talk about spice, now that one's going to be really spicy because, when you're boiling crawfish, your corn, your sausage, potatoes, that's your first batch to make sure that the seasoning is right. So you sometimes overdo that batch. So it'll be some pretty spicy corn, spicy potatoes. So I'd be careful on those.
I'm willing to suffer through. To echo Jose, thank you so much. Thank you so much. What's the baby's name?
Jason Starr.
Beautiful.
So raise her up.
Yeah. Let's see her. Aww.
Look at you, Mama.
She just got her first 2 teeth. They're coming out. So she's about ready to have some crawfish.
You all go to sleep again in a couple of years.
Yeah.
That's not true. You are never going to sleep again. I have a 12-year-old. You're never going to sleep safely ever again.
I believe it.
There's a whole level of fear that is like none other.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Jose?
I don't think so, because you took the boil taco from me.
Cooking is love. It's also theft, man.
Yeah. Yes, it is. No, I just really want to thank the Harrys yet again. That throughout the years, they have been so hospitable and open to all of my insane questions, and even when things are going crazy, such as in a pandemic. They're willing to talk. They're willing to open themselves to everyone, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Jose, you didn't mention the morning you came by and someone had just broken in our truck and stole all our boudin.
Well, that's because I didn't know if it was appropriate. But that was a memorable
Yeah.
morning. There was glass everywhere, and one of the best things I've ever heard you say is, well, someone needed it more than me. And I think that is just so kind and thoughtful.
Yeah, I needed my window more than him, but the boudin he could have, right?
So that's it, Todd. Unless you have anything else, we can take final questions because we still have a few minutes. If anyone wants to
Sounds like
ask
Jason.
a quick question, it sounds like she's got the last word.
Well, thanks to everyone for joining us on behalf of Humanities Texas and Foodways Texas, two of our state's great organizations. Grateful to the Harrys, and of course, grateful to Jose.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you to all the organizations. Yes, most definitely. All right.